the dog. In When Evil Lurks, Pedro discovers that a demonic force is spreading throughout the region and rushes to get his children out of his ex-wife's house before it's too late. The problem is that, without realizing it, he's already brought the evil with him. Shortly before he arrives, the family's dog quietly licks his clothes, which had been contaminated by a substance left behind by one of the possessed. It's an almost invisible detail the first time you watch the movie, but it sets up one of the film's most shocking scenes. While the adults argue about what to do, little Vicky peacefully plays with the dog in the living room. Everything seems completely normal. There's no suspenseful music, no unsettling camera angles, or any kind of warning that something is about to happen. That's exactly what makes the sequence so terrifying. Without any warning, the dog suddenly attacks the little girl and drags her away from the adults, who take several seconds to understand what just happened. Panic takes over the house, and Leonardo, the little girl's father, runs after the dog with a shotgun in his hands. And here's the part that many people don't notice. In this universe, there's one rule. Never, under any circumstances, use a firearm against anything that's possessed, because the gunshot spreads the evil. Pedro screams that at him. Leonardo shoots anyway. A short time later, Vicky walks back into the house. She appears to be completely unharmed, except the little girl who came back isn't Vicky anymore. And in the very next scene, she's dancing, smiling, while her own mother is right in front of her. The Witch's Visit. In Weapons, we follow the disappearance of several children from a small town. As the investigation progresses in search of them, it becomes clear that there's an evil force manipulating the events and turning ordinary people into instruments of a much greater plan. That's exactly what happens to Marcus Miller, the school principal. He and his husband Terry are quietly at home when someone knocks on the door. They answer it, and it's Gladys. She asks for nothing more than a glass of water, and it's Terry himself who insists on letting the old woman inside. Little does he know, once inside the house, Gladys cuts her own hand and performs a quick ritual right there on the spot. And just like that, the principal completely loses control over his own actions. His first target is the man sitting right beside him. Marcus beats his own husband, Terry, to death by smashing his head over and over again until his face caves in. The most disturbing part is that Marcus seems completely incapable of fighting what's happening. He's functioning as nothing more than the witch's puppet. Shortly afterward, Gladys sends him to hunt down the teacher, Justine. Marcus chases after her in a completely uncontrollable frenzy. The chase comes to an end when he's struck by a speeding car, dying instantly. The Surgeon. Hostel begins as an ordinary trip across Europe. Josh and his friends are enjoying a vacation full of parties until they accept the recommendation of what appears to be the perfect hostel in Slovakia. But everything is part of a trap created by a secret organization that sells tourists to wealthy clients who pay to them. Josh is one of the first to disappear. When he wakes up, he realizes that he's trapped inside a dark room, tied to a chair, and completely at the mercy of someone he doesn't know. The person responsible is a Dutch businessman whom the group had casually met earlier during their trip. That revelation makes the scene even more disturbing because it shows that everything had been planned from the very beginning. During their conversation, the man explains that he always dreamed of becoming a surgeon, but never managed to pursue the profession because of the tremors in his hands. Now, through the organization, he's living out that fantasy in the worst possible way. The cruelest part comes when Josh begs for help. The businessman seems to feel sorry for him. He kneels down, does something quickly to Josh's feet, unties him, and opens the door. Josh gets up to run and immediately collapses onto the floor. The Dutch man had just cut the Achilles tendons in both of Josh's feet. Josh drags himself across the floor toward the exit, unable to understand why his legs won't respond. The businessman lets him keep trying, simply watching him, and when he finally gets tired of the game, he pulls Josh back and kills him. The Pretzel. Old starts with a brilliant premise. A group of tourists discovers that the beautiful beach where they decided to spend the day causes time to pass at an impossible speed. Within just a few hours, children become adults. Adults age by decades, and every health problem progresses at exactly the same pace. That's exactly where Crystal comes in, an influencer obsessed with her own appearance who suffers from a severe calcium deficiency. At first, she seems concerned only with hiding the wrinkles that suddenly begin appearing. But while everyone else tries to understand what's happening, her body begins failing in a horrifying way. Without her medication, her bones become extremely fragile, and the accelerated aging turns that condition into a death sentence. Desperate to keep anyone from seeing what she looks like, Crystal hides inside a cave. When Trent and Maddox enter the cave, she panics and tries to attack them. During the chase, she falls and breaks one of her arms. The most disturbing detail is that on that beach, every injury heals almost instantly, except the bone heals back completely crooked. From that point on, every attempt to stand causes another fracture. Every broken bone heals in the wrong position, twisting her body even further out of shape. Within just a few seconds, her body becomes completely contorted until she dies in the darkness of the cave. The Whisper. Martyrs follows Anna, a young woman who falls into the hands of a secret society led by a woman known only as Mademoiselle. The group's objective is cruel, to push people to the absolute limit of suffering in order to discover whether anything exists after death. For weeks, Anna is held captive and subjected to a constant cycle of abuse, isolation, and humiliation. Everything is part of a gruesome experiment. According to the organization's beliefs, some victims are able to move beyond physical pain and reach a state of transcendence, becoming true martyrs. During the final stage of the ritual, Anna undergoes the ultimate test. Every inch of skin is removed from her body, leaving only the skin on her face, and against all expectations, she remains alive. Strapped to a metal structure, she stops reacting to the world around her. Her gaze changes completely, as though she's seeing something no one else can see. That's the exact moment Mademoiselle has been waiting for all these years. The leader approaches and asks Anna to reveal what she's seeing. Anna simply whispers a few words into her ear. The audience never learns what was said, but the reaction is immediate. Shortly afterward, Mademoiselle gathers her followers, says only, "Keep doubting and take your own life." Anna's fate is never shown directly, but it's heavily implied that she dies soon afterward. The Frozen Head. In Jason X, a group of people has the brilliant idea of taking Jason into space. And, well, we already know that's going to lead to a lot of deaths. One of the movie's most memorable deaths happens right at the beginning. Adrienne is part of the scientific team responsible for examining Jason's frozen body aboard the Grendel spaceship. While working alone in the laboratory, she believes the killer is still completely incapacitated. But, just like it always happens in these movies, that feeling of safety doesn't last very long. Jason suddenly awakens, effortlessly overpowers Adrienne, and drags her over to a sink filled with liquid nitrogen. Instead of acting quickly, he deliberately takes his time, holding the scientist's face beneath the liquid for several seconds. When he finally lifts her back up, Adrienne is no longer able to react. Jason then slams her face against the metal counter, and her frozen head instantly shatters into pieces. The Pole. In Hereditary, one of the film's most bizarre deaths begins when Annie forces her older son, Peter, to take his younger sister, Charlie, to a teenage party. Charlie is shy and clearly doesn't belong in that environment, while Peter just wants to enjoy the night with his friends. Without paying attention to his sister, Charlie ends up eating a piece of cake containing walnuts, despite having an extremely severe allergy. Within seconds, her throat begins to close, and she panics as she struggles to breathe. Peter realizes what's happening and speeds off in the car, trying to reach the hospital before it's too late. In the backseat, Charlie desperately fights for air and, in a frantic attempt to breathe, sticks her head out of the window. That's the exact moment Peter suddenly swerves to avoid an animal crossing the road. The car passes inches away from a wooden utility pole, and the impact comes completely out of nowhere. The most devastating part isn't even the accident itself, it's everything that comes afterward. Peter simply goes into shock, drives all the way home without being able to look back, and walks upstairs to his bedroom as if his brain had completely shut down. The next morning, the silence is shattered by his mother's desperate screams as she discovers her daughter's body. The Sacrifice. In Would You Rather, an eccentric millionaire named Shepard Lambrick gathers a group of people desperate for money to participate in a game where every round forces them to choose between two terrible options. And as the game progresses, it becomes harder and harder to leave without carrying an enormous weight on your conscience. Travis is one of the contestants, and unlike most of the others, he genuinely shows concern for the people around him, but that ends up costing him dearly. After an argument with Julian, Lambrick's son, he becomes the target of the next round. This time, the choice is between injuring another contestant with an ice pick or delivering a brutal lash to Travis with a sjambok, a South African whip famous for the force of its impact. The players choose to whip Travis, believing that's the less cruel option. The problem is that the lashes keep piling up, and when it's finally his turn to make a decision, Travis chooses to receive even more lashes rather than hurt another contestant. After taking so many blows, his body can no longer take it. He loses consciousness and dies shortly afterward. The Door. 13 Ghosts became famous for its terrifying ghosts and its mansion full of deadly traps, but there's one scene that to this day is the first thing most people remember about the movie. Ben Moss is the lawyer responsible for accompanying the family to the strange glass house they inherited. As the mansion's mysteries begin to unfold, he puts on the special glasses that allow him to see the spirits trapped inside. That's when he comes face to face with the Angry Princess, one of the most disturbing ghosts in the collection. Terrified, Ben begins backing down the hallway without paying attention to his surroundings. His entire focus is on the apparition in front of him. The problem is that the entire house functions like one giant machine, filled with glass walls and doors that move automatically through a hidden mechanism. Within seconds, 2 glass doors slide shut at high speed, closing at the exact spot where Ben is standing. The trap hits him before he even realizes he's in danger. The detail that made this sequence so unforgettable is the visual effect that comes immediately afterward. For a few moments, Ben remains standing as though nothing had happened. Only then does one half of his body slowly slide down the glass, while the other half remains on the opposite side before finally collapsing. The Angel saw 3 features one of the franchise's most memorable traps, precisely because it breaks Jigsaw's main rule. Every victim should always have a chance to survive, and the person who discovers that in the worst possible way is Detective Allison Carey. After being captured, Carey wakes up trapped inside a massive metal device connected to her chest by several hooks. The recording explains that she has only 1 minute to escape. The only way out is to stick her hand into a container filled with acid to retrieve the key that unlocks the padlock, holding the device to her body. Even knowing what she's about to face, Carey refuses to give up. She endures the pain, finds the key, and manages to unlock the padlock before the timer reaches 0. For a few seconds, it looks like she actually beat the test. Except she didn't. The mechanism simply doesn't release the device. The trap was never meant to work. Later, the franchise reveals that Amanda sabotaged the device with Hoffman's help, turning what was supposed to be a test into a disguised execution. When the timer reaches 0, the mechanism violently springs open and kills Carey instantly. The image resembles a metal angel, which is exactly where the trap gets its nickname from. The Drop. 28 days later follows Jim, a man who wakes up from a coma and discovers that England has been devastated by a virus that transforms people into extremely violent creatures within seconds. During his escape, he meets Selena, Frank, and young Hannah. Little by little, the group forms a bond that feels almost like a family, making the audience believe they might actually survive together. The film builds Frank into one of the group's most human characters. Amid the chaos caused by the rage virus, he becomes a protective father figure, a dependable ally, and one of the few sources of hope for Jim and everyone else. That's exactly why his death hit so hard. It happens at the very moment the group finally believes they've found help. After following a radio broadcast to a military blockade in Manchester, they arrive expecting to find soldiers in safety. Instead, they find silence. The place is empty, abandoned, and strangely peaceful. Frustrated, Frank kicks a nearby roadblock. It seems like a small, almost insignificant gesture, but that single action sets everything in motion. The noise startles a crow perched on the structure. The bird moves. The corpse of an infected person hanging above begins to sway, and a single drop of blood falls directly into Frank's eye. It's not a bite. It's not a chase. It's literally one drop. Frank immediately understands what has happened. Knowing the virus acts within seconds, he uses his final moments of clarity to protect Hannah. He apologizes, tells her he loves her, and orders everyone to stay away. That's what makes this scene so heartbreaking. He's still there, he's still Frank, but he already knows he's about to disappear. Within moments, the transformation begins. Jim hesitates. Selena screams for him to do something, but before anyone can react, soldiers suddenly appear and shoot Frank in the back. The cruelest part of this scene is how quickly it happens. A beloved character doesn't die during some massive battle. He's destroyed by a single drop of blood. The Bedroom. Terrifier 2 follows Sienna, a teenage girl who begins to realize that Art the Clown has returned from the dead and is spreading terror throughout the city on Halloween night. While she tries to understand the supernatural connection between her family and the killer, several people cross Art's path without having the slightest idea of what's about to happen. One of them is Allie, Sienna's friend. Someone knocks on her front door. She opens it. Unlike most slasher villains who kill their victims quickly, Art turns the attack into a long session of torture. That almost childlike behavior is exactly what makes Art even more disturbing. While his victim fights to survive, Art seems to be enjoying every single second of it. The sequence comes to an end when Allie's mother walks into the bedroom and finds her daughter in a devastating condition, immediately realizing that there's nothing left that can be done. Much of the scene's impact comes from its practical effects. The production relied on makeup, prosthetics, and animatronics instead of CGI, creating a sequence that became one of the most talked about moments in modern horror. The Tide. Blackwater takes a very different approach from most killer animal movies. Instead of making the monster enormous or filling the screen with special effects, it creates tension through situations that could actually happen in real life, and Adam's death is the perfect example of that. After a massive crocodile capsizes the boat during the group's tour, Adam, his pregnant wife Grace, and his sister-in-law Lee barely manage to escape and take refuge in the branches of a tree. The problem is that the tide keeps rising, time keeps passing, and rescue never comes. Realizing that staying where they are means dying anyway, Adam makes a risky decision. He swims to the overturned boat, trying to flip it back back over so everyone can escape. For a few moments, it looks like his plan is actually going to work, but the crocodile had simply been waiting. The animal silently emerges from beneath the water and attacks Adam before he has any chance to react. The film makes a brilliant choice here. Instead of showing the attack in graphic detail, the camera stays focused on Grace and Lee's expressions as they watch everything unfold without being able to do a single thing. That's where the real horror comes from, their complete helplessness. The most disturbing moment, however, comes afterward. That night, while a storm pours over the mangrove swamp, the two women remain trapped in the tree, listening to the sounds of the crocodile feeding in the darkness. The film lets your imagination fill in the rest, and that ends up being far more terrifying than any visual effect. And what many people don't know is that Blackwater was inspired by a real crocodile attack that happened in Australia, which makes this entire sequence even more uncomfortable to watch. In fact, there's a video on your screen right now where we show horror movies that were inspired by real events. Click on it, check it out. I'll see you there.